Hey everybody, welcome to Vacuum Wars. This is a new series where I'm basically unscripted, just going over various products that I have tested and reviewed in the past, and just going over the basic pros and cons, why I would recommend it to some people, and why I would not recommend it to other people. And today I'm talking about the Eufy 11S, which is an interesting robot vacuum. It is a robot that has been basically unchanged on the market for 5 or so years. It's probably the best selling robot vacuum in this price range, bar none. And a lot of manufacturers have tried to copy it, like literally exactly try to copy the Eufy 11S, because it has found this balance between, affordability and functionality. So it does what a robot vacuum should do, that is to say, clean hard floors and carpet really well. And it does it without adding a lot of the premium features that can drive robot vacuums much, much more expensive. So it doesn't have a lot of those things, and we'll go over what I mean by some of that as we go through this. So yeah, the Eufy 11S, some of the pros. I say one of the reasons that this has usually won a lot of my best budget picks, like I think in 2020 it won best budget robot vacuum, is because it does a lot of the things well. It does cleaning hard floors and carpet really well. Its carpet performance was notably better than a lot of vacuums in this price range. In fact, I think it was 70% it got on the deep clean score, but in any case, it was higher than average for robot vacuums in this price range. And I don't know, I think in part that has to do with the power level. I think it had 15 CFM. Eufy says it gets like, I think it's 1,300 pascals of suction. And I would encourage you, a lot of times, robot vacuum manufacturers, whatever they say about the power levels, it's not that it's not true, it's just that it doesn't necessarily have any bearing on its performance. And I think that the suction numbers are less important numbers to be looking at with this. But airflow is really good. It seems to have translated well, as I say, into the carpet cleaning. Its hard floor cleaning is good as well. The only thing, and part of that is due to its two Brushroll Design here, with two side brushes. A lot of robot vacuums will only have one. It's also very slim, and part of its name is slim, and you can see that it is, and well, I guess you can't really compare it just looking at this, but it gets under things a lot better than other robot vacuums do. So also its battery life, I think they say it's 100 minutes on low power and 50 minutes on high power, which is, again, as far as these budget robot vacuums are concerned, it's pretty good. Now, battery life is a little bit important for these budget robot vacuums, and it's probably a good time to talk about what's the main thing in getting a cheap robot vacuum versus a more expensive one. And really the main thing that you don't get with a budget robot vacuum is smart navigation. So the Eufy 11S, as well as every robot vacuum in this price range, navigates more or less randomly. If you were to look at it, it looks like it's just bouncing around the room. But it's actually a little bit smarter than that. It's got algorithms that tell it to bounce in certain situations. It knows when it's like near a chair leg or something like that, so it circles around them. It knows to get to certain rooms by, mostly turning one direction. It's got a lot of smartness within that sort of randomness. And what I've found in comparing like a random robot vacuum to a smart robot vacuum, which kind of goes in more or less straight lines, is that they clean the rooms just about the same speed. There's not a whole lot of difference in the speed, and really not a lot of difference in the coverage. They both cover the entire area in about the same amount of time. The big difference is if you have a large house with lots of rooms, a random robot vacuum is going to have a hard time getting to every room every single time, whereas because it is random, and maybe you'll get over here sometimes and you run it the next time it didn't get there because of that random nature and the larger size. Whereas a smart robot vacuum would make a map of your house. It would know exactly where it has and hasn't gone. So that's one of the big deals. I don't find it to be a big deal, especially for people with smaller homes. If you have an apartment or something like that, I think the Eufy 11S or really any the random robot is just fine for you. Also, I think one of the reasons that I like this is that you don't have to be as concerned of whether or not you have hard floors or carpets. This is a robot vacuum. I wouldn't say it's a big deal. You could have half and half, or mostly carpets or mostly hard floors. The Eufy 11S is a good all-around robot. A couple other pros for this is it's a fairly quiet robot at 70 decibels and on max power or somewhere around there. The bin size is pretty big. I think it's 600 milliliters, and that holds a pretty good amount. Some of these can be pretty small. I would say it's a little above average, and probably above average if we're just talking about budget robots. Another pro here is Boost IQ. So this is in the name, usually, the Boost IQ. And what that is basically a different power level. So I mentioned it has a max power level and a low power level. And then it has this Boost IQ concept, which is where when it goes over carpet, it's going to adjust the suction up. And I actually do think that's a good feature for this. It optimizes the battery life, number one. So you get probably a mix between that 100 minutes and that 50 minutes, depending on how much carpet you have. It is important to boost the power for carpet because that's where we can get those high. It's harder for robot vacuums to clean deep down carpets, especially on their lower power. So that Boost IQ is an actual functional thing that is good for these. It's a feature that you actually don't see much on budget robot vacuums. You do see it more on the premium robot vacuum. So that is a pretty good thing. All of these return to their base after, when they run out of a battery, and now we kind of get into the cons. So why that's a good thing that they return to their base, and it is important, I think, to follow the instructions about where you put the base and give it enough space. All the things that you can do in that regard as far as following the instructions will help it return better to its base. But when it starts to sense its battery is low, it's going to do that. And that's a negative thing also in the sense that they don't really know when they're done cleaning a room, right? They just kind of vacuum until the battery gets low, and then when it's low, they return to the base. Whereas a smart robot vacuum, if it's vacuuming a small room, it might say, okay, well, I'm done, I'm going back to the base. But in this case, you have to almost run it till it's done, which in this case isn't all that long anyway. So another con is it just comes with the remote. So this is one of the things I mentioned. This is basically like a 5 or so year old robot vacuum that hasn't changed much, and a lot of budget robot vacuums these days even come with a Wi-Fi capability, so you can connect them to your Wi-Fi, which means that you can control them and get alerts while you're at work and things kind of things. You might be able to start and stop it while you're at work, or get an alert saying it's stuck. But with this one, you don't have that ability. It comes with a remote, which in some ways I actually like remotes better than the app because it's just right there, tell it to start and stop. It's a lot less fuss in some ways, but it is convenient to be able to control these, at least in the start and stop function, and get alerts from the app. You can also use Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant if you had that too. There is an upgraded version of the Eufy 15C, which basically is pretty much the same. I think they have even the RoboVac 11 Max, which is different in that it just has the upgraded app, but then again, it is more expensive. So another con that I think is important to know with the 11S is it is not as good with larger debris on hard floors and carpet. So in our debris test, we test things like Fruit Loops, which is about the largest size. And this is one of the few robot vacuums that have trouble with that. And it's because it's actually, the reason it's somewhat bad with larger debris like that is also the reason it's good with carpets, and it's mostly because it's very low to the ground. It's low profile, helps it with carpets. It also helps it to get under furniture, so it's a trade-off. I would say that the large debris like Fruit Loops are not a common size of debris that people have on their floors, so it's more of a torture test anyway, and not something you're likely to have a problem with. Another con I would say is, so the brushes on the Eufy, and this is something that I would say with every budget robot vacuum, is that if you have really long hair, human hair, or really long pet hair Less so with pet hair, typically isn't that long. It can get caught in these rollers. These rollers aren't very good for resisting tangles at all. So you do need to keep these clean, and it's important to keep them clean because they can get wrapped around these axles and stuff like that. So maintenance is a good idea with these. You're going to have to empty the dustbin every time anyway. You might as well check the brush to see if it needs any maintenance. But it pops out really easy. It's easy to take care of. So it's not that big of a deal. And as I say, this is the thing that, and actually the Eufy is a little bit better than some of the other budget robot vacuums with Tangles, but it's minimally better. It's still a budget robot vacuum in that regard. Checking my notes here to see if there's anything else to mention. I did actually test this against the 15C Max at one point, and it was interesting that this did better at the carpet deep clean test than the 15C Max, which is more expensive. The 15C Max had a little bit more suction, which was good for things like the crevice pickup test, but I would rather have the carpet deep clean if it was me. So they had virtually the same airflow numbers, and they had a lot of the same specs as far as it seemed like the same kind of hardware was being used as well. So the long and the short of this is, if you're looking to get into a robot vacuum and you're looking to spend the least amount of money possible, the 11S is a tried and true thing. I mean, you can see the reviews on this. After so many years, it's still ranking high because the reviews are great, customer satisfaction is good, but I would say that it's not for people who don't understand that, you know, with these budget robot vacuums, because they're not as smart, you do have to do things like make your house a little bit robot ready. So, you know, pick up the cords or pick up the things that it's likely to get stuck on. And, you know, if you have a room that the house that's relatively wide open, you know, it's easy to get to places and stuff, you'll love something like this. It'll be very, very useful for this price. But if you're expecting it to sort of navigate around all your cords and navigate around all your dog toys and cat toys and these kinds of things, these are just not smart enough to figure that out. They've got brilliant robot vacuums these days with cameras all over and lasers all over that can figure that out, but you're going to be paying for that luxury. So with something like this, just clean up beforehand and make sure, you know, it's not likely to get stuck in any of those places, and you will absolutely love this if you know about those limitations. All right, that's it for this episode, and we'll see you next time.